President Trump has started to ratchet up its threats to take out the threat of uranium in Iran. And also we have some news leading up to the primaries and midterms that are very important and some things for us to be very aware of. We'll talk about all this and more on today's Pipeline Report. All right, well, welcome in everyone to today's Pipeline Report. We have a lot to cover as with President Trump in office, it is never a dull moment. And if you ever needed some entertainment, no need to watch soap operas or telenovelas, the news can do just as well. And so a lot of events we want to get into today. I'm going to go ahead and dive into this. We had tragic news over the weekend that's making nationwide and worldwide headlines of an event that we want to pray for the families and victims and point out that, you know, there are events and things that happen that are out of control, and news and things are starting to come out. But I want to play a clip from our mayor here this morning who talked about this and a good perspective of how we need to think through and process through this and what we can do in this moment as the investigation is underway and findings of what actually happened.
We stand in difficult times. One of the things that I think is most important is that if you are experiencing abuse and violence in your home, seek the resources. Don't stay where you are. Seek the resources to escape. The biggest lesson that we have is that we must protect those who cannot protect themselves. There are resources available. Take advantage of those resources. We mourn for these children. We mourn for the women who are recovering, we hope. We pray for their recovery and healing, and we ask that the community draw together to give support to these families and these victims.
And so that's our mayor, Tom Arsenault, here in Shreveport, Louisiana. After upwards of reports, I've seen 11 people were shot and injured, and 8 children were killed, some of them being the shooter's own children. And the police ended up shooting the shooter as he got in an escape car to get away. The report is that he was shooting in upwards of 3 homes and eventually taking out people. And something that is very tragic here. And people are asking me from everywhere that I've lived, all our friends, like, hey, are you okay? Or we're fine in our area. But we do want to keep our thoughts and prayers out to the families and those involved of the tragedy of these kids who innocently lost their life in a domestic dispute and violent dispute here. Anything you want to add on to that before we dive in?
I'll just say this for our community is that this happens in many communities around America, and part of our problem is judicial system, our prisons, a whole cascade of issues that are related to this because the courts let these guys out, a lot of them all around the country, especially like New York City. Sometimes there's no bail. In other words, it's free. Once you get arrested, they put you right back out on the streets. And evidently there was a history here of violence, like the mayor said. If you're in a situation like that, get out. So they were aware that he had a history of this. And that's the sad part. We need to pray for America for awakening, really. That's our heart's cry, because if the hearts of the children, the hearts of the fathers are changed toward their fathers, then we can start seeing a real transformation in our country. And so we do pray. Thank you for praying. It's about just a few blocks from our congregation here is where the thing happened. And the Lord spoke to me and said we'd get a harvest out of that, those innocent lives that were lost, that God would use their blood to cry out for a harvest and bring our community together. That's the main thing that we are seeing tied to this. So thank you for praying for us. Many of you checked on us, and we're fine, but this was a family issue, and unfortunately, it's becoming more and more common in America. So thanks for praying for us as a city.
Yeah, and so we always want to keep that. We'll keep that updated. If we see anything, we'll post about it. Now, moving on into the news of the events that happened over the weekend that I think are very interesting. We're going to start off going back to the Strait of Hormuz in the Middle East with the conflict there. As we saw last week, you heard about President Trump putting on a blockade on the blockade and preventing Iran from controlling the ports and the system there. And what ended up happening was there's major conflict in Iran. And what we're finding out is that Iran doesn't know who's the people in Iran, military, politicians, and even the theocracy leaders there. They don't know who's really in control because nobody's really stepped forward and kind of grasped the reins of the military, the political system, and even these negotiations. So who Trump's negotiating with is different than the military who's there. And there was an incident in the Strait of Hormuz with Iran and with its allies, India, France, and the UK, where there were Indian ships who were coming out of the harbor, and Iran ended up telling them, hey, yeah, you're free to go, but they ended up firing at them. So I want to play this clip from the Morning Wire, from Daily Wire, where they talk about, and it's Cabot Phillips talking about what happened a little bit. And then you hear some audio from the Indian captain of the ship who explaining like, hey, stop shooting. Like, you told us we could go.
To let him turn around after shouting, quote, "You gave me clearance to go."
Sepa Navy, this is Motoranga Mar Herald. You gave me clearance to go. My name second on your list. You gave me clearance to go. You are fighting now. Let me turn back.
And then following those attacks, Iranian officials said, quote, "As long as the U.S. does not agree to the complete freedom of navigation for vessels, the situation in the Strait of Hormuz will remain tightly controlled and in its previous state." But the president...
And so what Iran is doing is saying we're going to take back control of the strait after Trump took back control. And the Secretary of Energy here in the United States went on morning radio or TV shows yesterday and talked about how, and was asked the question of, will gas get below $3? He initially was like, yes, it will. It'll get back to, and then the interviewer just kept asking questions. There's a whole hubbub about this, and it's really a nothing burger, where he ended up saying, like, look, it'll be here for a while, but it's going to rebound. You have Wall Street and gas prices dip down low, and then you have Iran make this move, and so it goes back up. But what's interesting is that to understand the situation out of the Strait of Hormuz is that oil tankers, China, and even Chinese oil tankers, they can go to any of the ports there as long as they're not Iranian. So they can go to the UAE, they could go to Oman, they can go to Saudi Arabia. But if they go to Iranian ports and fill their vessels, they will get seized, and that's what's happening. And there's even reports about how President Trump and the Navy, most of the U.S. military, they seized and shot down a ship coming out of Iranian port that was Iranian, and warned them and said, hey, look, we're going to shoot you here in the motor room. So if you're in the motor room, leave. And I know you had something to say about that as well from that story.
Yeah. One thing about what's happening here is, a lot of accusations are flying against President Trump concerning who's make these choices. And we saw that they hit the motor of the ship after they warned them. There's plenty of video out there of us shooting at them, but that's part of the blockade. But President Trump put a post out on X, and this is what he said. He said, let me pull it up so everybody can see it. Hope you can read that. I'll read it out. It says, Israel never talked me into the war with Iran. The results of October 7th added to my lifelong opinion that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. I watch and read the fake news pundits, and the polls is total disbelief. 90% of what I say are lies and made up stories. The polls are rigged, such as 2020 presidential election was rigged, just like the results of Venezuela, which the media doesn't like talking about. The results of Iran will be amazing. And if Iran's leaders' regime change are smart, Iran can have a great and prosperous future. Donald J. Trump. I think this is where we are. And I think a lot of people are, saying Israel got us into this battle. And you can go back from the 1980s, President Trump, when he was just Donald Trump, spoke all over the country about the need to do this to Iran and to shut them down. This has been a lifelong journey of his to remove this from the world and the evil. And I'll share this because this is a big issue about the anti-Israel issue that's going on in America, especially among our young people. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Cameron, all these other people that are espousing this anti-Israel rhetoric. In the Constitution of Iran, in 1979, when they overthrew the Shah, they wrote in their constitution that their worldview was this. They said that we believe in a global Islamic rule of all nations, that every nation have a Quranic background and submit to Shia law. That is part of their constitution. So here's the thing that we need to pray about in America. When you see the anti-Israel issue, which part of Iran's issue is with Jews and Christians, so they want us to become Islamic. So when you start partnering, become pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian, pro-Muslim countries like this, you are giving feed to that spirit that wants to rule the world. So it's a cascading event when we begin to tie these things together. So we're not just fighting the nation of Iran, we're fighting the spirit of Islam that wants to rule the world. And you're seeing it in Europe, the Islamization of Europe. You're seeing it in America now, all over the place. We got Mayor Mondani. And who would have ever thought after the radical Muslims took down the Twin Towers that we would have a Muslim mayor in New York City? And we're seeing this even on Passover. On Easter, he refused to use the name of Jesus because that's not part of his faith, obviously. But yet we have to honor Ramadan. We have to honor Muhammad when he wants us to. So this is that Islamization of America as well. This is a dangerous moment in time. And so what's going on in Iran, we cannot bend it toward an anti-Israel issue, because if we do, we're playing right into the hands of the enemy concerning this issue.
And one thing to remember is initially when the Marines were created, Thomas Jefferson was trying to understand the Barbary pirates and the Barbary War, and ended up taking military action after possessing a Quran and reading it and realizing and talking to Islamic diplomats in Britain and trying to understand why they were attacking, U.S. vessels and even in other nations' vessels. And his decision and his conclusion is we have to take them out, and that's why you have in the Marine song "From the Shores of Tripoli" is because they went in and created the Marines to go in and take them out for this event, because of even in the 1700s, the Islamization of military assets in Africa to attack U.S. vessels and other vessels. And his thought was, let's have the war over there so they don't come over here, and keep that push back. And you're starting to see that play out here today. And then also the ties of that were people of ilk that we mentioned earlier, who said, Iran's not tied to Hamas, Iran's not tied to Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran's not tied to the Yemenis, the Houthis in Yemen. And so, but now here you are seeing it where part of this ceasefire, Iran is asking for a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. And so now you're starting to see some breakthrough there. But in Iran now, the factions more so, I should say this, is divided into four ways. You have the Iranian army, you have the IRGC, you have the theocracy, the Ayatollahs, and then you have the elected officials. So you have four factions there that are trying to get on the same page, and they're all trying to figure out who's who in the zoo. Mm-hmm. And so is the world, and so is President Trump. And they don't know, because the theocracy is in hiding and or is dead altogether, and the IRGC is the same. And so you have the army and the elected officials trying to figure out what to do and to negotiate with, and now you're having a new round of negotiations in Islamabad. And so Now the U.S. is trying to figure out what's going to happen. And Trump says what he says because that's what the world understands. And that's what that part of the world understands. And a lot of our Eastern mindset and Western, more so Western mindset, doesn't understand the Eastern mindset of, look, they need directness. They need clarity. And especially in parts of the world where when you're having these negotiations, you're having them in English. And a lot of those negotiators, this is their second language. So when President Trump is being very direct and very clear, they actually appreciate that. Obviously, you have senators and congressmen and officials here in America and podcasters who are using it to their advantage to cause for clicks. But the reality is look, the people over there are saying, we appreciate this, especially the interpreters, because, okay, a lot of these negotiations for Iran, it's in a different language. It's Farsi, and then so you're having to go from Farsi to English and English to Farsi, and then back and forth, and then getting another nation involved and understanding that even English is their second language. So you're adding in different world dynamics. So when Trump says and comes out and says, if you don't come to the table and you don't do what I want, then this is going to happen, and he warns them, this is very clear, and they actually appreciate it. Then on top of that, let's look at it this way, is President Trump is trying to allow for Iran to have an economy after. And one of the things that has recently come out, and Victor Davis Hanson pointed this out, is when you had the East-West Germany divide, it took a while, and even after Russia, in the fall of Russia, it took a while for the revolution to come about, for freedom to come about, to be turned over from a communist regime into what it is today. That didn't just happen overnight. And I think Trump understands that, but what he's trying to do is ramp up the timeline and allow the people, because he realizes this, and this is his stance. Just like in Venezuela, he wants the people who are there to step up and to allow freedom to come forward, and you're not seeing that play out. Now, taking a step back into the story about the Strait of Hormuz, you have a lot of the podcasters and the news pundits, you know, taking their pot shots at President Trump and the military and this regime and this administration, and thinking, oh, well, he does these things, but he doesn't know what he's doing. You know, we should all be fearful. We should be worried. The reality is this, and Victor Davis Hanson pointed this out. It says, look, the military, the Navy, and everybody involved they do this game theory. They play these situations out. If we were to go in and attack Iran, here's what would happen. And people are saying, oh, well, how did Trump not see that Iran would put mines in the Strait of Hormuz? How did he not see that they would do this? He did. That's why the U.S. is then putting in a blockade back in its instance. And it's not to say that it's President Trump. It's more so the military who have understood this. And what President Trump is doing, he's getting out of the way and letting the military do what it needs to do. And being that he has a military background and education, he understands this. So it's not to say that like he's, you know, planned this and prepared this and knew everything that would happen. It's one of the possibilities, and this is a reaction. But if you watch and you pay attention to what he does, what he says in these negotiations, he always talks about it. And he says, look, we're going to give you the chance to come to the table and negotiate this and not go a step further. But the reality is here's what we're going to do. And he has that, you know, red line, and he holds to it to a varying degree. But now we have some clips you want to play here about this, what President Trump's stance is in regards to Israel.
Yeah, guys, good morning. I just spoke with President Trump for about 20 minutes, and he told me if Iran does not sign this deal, the whole country is getting blown up. Telling me U.S. Kushner and Steve Witkoff are in Islamabad, Pakistan, for meetings on Tuesday, possibly into Wednesday, to try and get this agreement across the finish line. The president telling Fox News this is a very simple deal, but this is the last chance for the Iranians. The president very clear in our conversation that he is not making the same mistake that President Obama made, giving cash to the Iranians and allowing them to continue a nuclear program. The deal on the table is to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to ensure that the Iranians do not have uranium that is underground after Operation Midnight Hammer last summer. And again, the president telling Fox News that the entire country will be blown up. Bridges and power plants will be targeted if the Iranians do not sign this agreement. This is a significant development because we are in this less than 72-hour window before the ceasefire between the United States and Iran expires. And the president has given the Iranians an opportunity for an off-ramp, an olive branch he is extending to the Iranian regime to avoid this region going back into war. And the president said the United States military is prepared. He said the U.S. has massive amounts of ammunition, even better munitions than they had in the opening days of Operation Epic Fury, to use against the Iranian regime, to target a variety of different positions across their country if they are not willing to make this good faith deal. And again, he tells Fox News that his special envoys are headed to the Middle East, and they are going to try and get this deal across the finish line. But this is in the hands of the Iranians, if they are willing to make a good faith agreement. And if they are not, the president has indicated there will be significant strikes against the Iranian regime in response if this diplomatic effort does not succeed. Guys?
So we see this red line being put into place. President Trump has put it out there. So we'll see if he actually holds through to this. And the point of bringing all this up and telling this is to pray for President Trump and the military who are involved with this, obviously for their protection, and hopefully some deal can be made. The reality is it more than likely won't, and some action will have to be taken. Israel talked about how you had the four greatest air forces coming in and doing part of these attacks. Obviously, you have the Israeli Air Force, U.S. Air Force, the Marine, and then the Navy Air Force there, as they each have their own separate air forces. So there is a possibility of increased attacks coming this week. That 72 hours timeline comes Wednesday evening. Obviously, as we've seen the last negotiations, we see things go around. It got pushed back because President Trump's trying his best to try to bring them to the table to make a deal, because he doesn't want to do what he's saying he might do. He's giving them every opportunity to do it. And the reality is there's, you go back to what I talked about before, is who are you negotiating with? Who are the leaders here that are the ones who need to do this? Who are the ones who can actually make this call? Who's the ones actually leading the Iranian military? Is it the IRGC? Are they really the ones involved? The theocratic leaders there who are here, Eric, just put it on me for a second, and who are really making these decisions of what things actually are. So within Iran, you have these things, and this is where Trump's being kind of understanding in this situation of trying to figure out like who needs to come to the table. And with these new negotiations in Pakistan, is hopefully the right leaders can come to the table. The problem is the IRGC and the military are saying, well, the theocratic leaders are really the ones who we're going to listen to, not to President Trump and someone who tweets. They didn't put it so kindly as I just did, but the reality is they're waiting for who they want to be, and they're telling at least the world, at least the ones who are speaking, that the theocratic leaders, the Ayatollahs, are the ones who are in charge. The problem is they're either no longer in existence or they're hiding somewhere and they're not communicating with people. So the reality is like there's a lot going on involved here, and the pundits and the podcasters are like, well, President Trump said this, he's not doing it, and they're taking advantage of it. It's like this is a messy situation involved around, one, the Strait of Hormuz, because it's affecting us with our gas prices, but then in two, it deals with preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons. And President Trump came out over the weekend and said, look, he said this exactly. He said, look, us and Iran military will go in and we'll take out uranium. What that means, I don't know, but he obviously has something on the stove that he's cooking and trying to get prepared to see that, hey, we're going to work with Iran here and the Iranian people to prevent them from having nuclear weapons. We'll see if that really comes about, but he's obviously got an idea and an understanding of the situation that is not being discussed, and it shouldn't be discussed, but it's coming out. I know you had some videos you might wanted to play, but
I sent them to you. I can't.
Okay.
I'm kicked off.
All right.
I can't stay online.
Do you have anything to say about that with what the guy from Fox said about Israel?
No, that's good.
Okay. All right, let's talk about this for a second. One thing we need to really pray about this is very, very concerning. Last week, there was a vote on the Senate floor that was brought up by Bernie Sanders to force Democrats and to show people where the Democrats are on a certain issue in regards to getting Israel and the military refunded. And Bernie Sanders brought up this bill to block funding from the United States to Israel, which all that money is spent in the United States for things like armored bulldozers and other military equipment there. But it's not necessarily the vote that matters, it's the results of the vote. The bill it failed, which is good, but here's the thing we need to be very aware of is that in this vote, upwards of 40 senators agreed to go forward and block this vote in the first vote. And all Republicans rejected it, obviously, but there were 40 Democrats who had partnered together with Bernie Sanders to say, we're not sending funding to Israel, which is very problematic. And why this is problematic is because I'm going to make sure I have the years right. In 2025, a similar vote Bernie Sanders brought up that failed again, and there was only 27 Democrats that push forward. And why this is interesting and why this is important is because you're seeing a lot of this talk about Israel controlling politicians, AIPAC specifically, but this just speaks to the fact that that is a fallacy. Because if AIPAC had control, you're hearing Marjorie Taylor Greene, people like Matt Gaetz, who are saying, and Thomas Massey were saying, AIPAC controls every Republican, every Democrat, every politician in D.C. And here's the case. If that were true, there would not be 40 senators from the Democratic side who would be voting against funding for Israel. Just clear and plain as simply it is. And then you even go back further. Other people have pointed this out, is if AIPAC was as efficient as they were, the Iran nuclear deal would not have passed. So we're seeing the inefficiencies of AIPAC and this whole idea from certain pundits say these things, and it's just falling flat on its face. So we have a lot of evidence here before us that it is kind of falling flat on its face, and we're trying to navigate through this and stay involved in it.
I got the Iranian thing, the woman.
Yeah, and then also, okay, give me a second. Let me pull this up. Do you want to say anything about that? Let me pull it up here.
I can't. I'm dead.
No, you can talk.
Okay. Oh, we can
Your
talk.
computer's dead, but we can still
my
talk.
computer's dead. I'm sorry. I lost all internet. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
got
can.
me?
You're
okay.
good.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting about in America, we got a clip here of an Iranian woman that came under the Obama administration, got into the country. Now she's been selling arms for Iran, getting weapons for them and ammunition, other things. We saw that Marco Rubio has already taken several visas away from others who have been outward speaking against America online. But now you have really integrated people that are Iranians in the country that are now participating in this war. And this is what happened when we had our open borders. And we're only going to see this increase in the days ahead until we root this out. So the immigration issue is still big. It's big on the hearts of Americans. And while we look at the re-elections that are coming up this fall, got to remember a lot of Republicans, both as well as Democrats, who are pushing for amnesty for many of these people that came into our country illegally. I saw one in the Texas Senate race, Cornyn against Paxton, and they said, Paxton's fighting for Texans, Cornyn's fighting for amnesty, and that's true. And you're starting to see that more and more where they're already here. I think they said under Biden's administration, I read today, that 10% of all births in America that happened during his term were all what we call latch babies. These were babies that were born to illegal aliens while they were here, immigrants, I should say, while they were here.
Anchor babies.
Yeah, anchor babies, they call them. And you think about that, 10% of all, that's thousands and thousands of children that are here and now they want citizenship. Okay, well, I'm not here to judge that. I'm just saying this is a systemic problem that we're having in our country, and we got to pray accordingly. I think Speaker Johnson did a great speech recently about immigration. He gave it from a biblical worldview. And one of the things he talked about, and I've talked about it at length as well, the scripture is very clear about helping the sojourner that comes among you. But even in Israel's time, if you were going to be a sojourner, you had to serve the God of Israel. In other words, you had to follow the tenets of the laws of the faith, and more so the laws than the faith. You could be an unbeliever, but you still had to obey the laws of the land, and you become somebody who celebrates that. Yesterday here locally, we had our Holocaust Remembrance Service, which we went to, and we celebrated a young man in our community. His name's John Henry Stewart. He's a celloist and considered the best celloist in the world. And his grandfather escaped the Holocaust out of Austria, and he brought his cello with him. A long story how he got it here. Well, his grandson was the one playing yesterday, that cello. But I thought about the price that was paid for that victory, and he did it the right way. And when he came here to America, and he was a doctor here in America and lived here for many years. At the end of our service yesterday, we celebrated and played two of the favorite songs of this Holocaust survivor from Austria, and one of them was "God Bless America." And I thought about that, and he wanted to celebrate the land in which he loved. He loved America because America was a place of safety. It was a sanctuary nation, but he did it the right way. He had to have a sponsor to come here. He came here. He adapted. He assimilated. He fell in love with our country, and then he celebrated his whole life. That's what the immigration we need in our country right now. So what we're doing in rooting out the illegals is rooting out people that don't want to be a part of this country. Now, there's a way to make it right. Let's make it right. And let's pray the politicians find a way to do that. But right now, we have so many criminals here. We've got to root them out. And now the Iranian issue is becoming very big. And I have Zach, if he can play that clip of this woman that they arrested yesterday in Los Angeles for the weapons that she was helping get to the Iranians for this battle that we're in. Did you find it?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time playing it. X is having a problem. But it's very interesting to see this come out of these arrests and issues. Arrested on, if I remember correctly, the charges of basically state secrets and trying to sell weapons. She was selling weapons. And so in Los Angeles, they made this arrest and they're bringing up charges, and a lot's involved here. And so if this is true, things are going to have to be in order for this to actually be prosecuted and deal with this. But it also speaks to the major problem. And a full understanding from this DOJ and an understanding here. And then you have the turmoil with Pam Bondi being removed. So there's a lot here up in the air. Who's going to take over? How are they going to prosecute this? How are they going to handle this? Who's going to eventually lead the DOJ? Because they're going to have to be the ones, okay, the FBI made the arrest to prosecute this. So the scary thing is this stuff was happening. So now how does it fall out and play out there? I'm trying to pull up that other clip. Seems like X is having a problem today. But the reality is look, we need to be more aware of what our politicians are going through to make sure they can fully prosecute this and deal with this. Can you say something while I try to pull this up?
Okay. Let's shift a little bit here toward the primary that's coming up in Virginia next week. This is a big one for me.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, this is...
Give me a second.
Woman charge. Okay. We did find the woman here. This is the report from Fox News about it. There you go.
Okay, here we go. We're gonna
arrested for trafficking arms on behalf of the Iranian government. Correspondent Max Gordon is in the Southland with more on that for us. Max, a crazy story with incredible pictures from the airport.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. Last night, 44-year-old Shamim Mafi, an Iranian national now living in the L.A. area, was arrested at LAX just before getting on a flight to Turkey. She's accused of trafficking arms on behalf of the Iranian government According to the FBI's Iran counterintelligence squad, Mafi is accused of selling Iranian-manufactured bombs, drones, assault weapons, and millions of rounds of ammunition to Sudan. Mafi was allegedly coordinating with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. According to the federal government, one of the contracts was worth 60 million euros, brokering the sale of Iranian-made drones between Iran's defense ministry and Sudan. In another instance, Mafi is accused of selling 55,000 bomb fuses to the Sudanese military. According to the criminal complaint, Mafi is a lawful permanent U.S. resident, though not a citizen. She was born in Iran, relocated to Turkey, but most recently has lived in Woodland Hills, California. Mafi travels frequently to Iran, Turkey, Oman, and other countries, and according to the feds, executed her illegal weapons brokering scheme from multiple locations, including right here in California. She's currently charged with conspiracy to violate the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. If convicted, Mafi faces up to 20 years in federal prison. Kevin, back to you.
So upwards of 20 years there in prison if convicted. And so this corruption and things is being brought out to the forefront. I know going back even to a couple years ago, Chuck Pierce really put out in his Passover Prophecies book of talking about ingenious ways to deal with the issues that we have here today. And the reality is look, the entire government is having to look that way into all this. But we do want to shift to the Virginia primaries in what's coming ahead, because this will affect the balance of power in Congress. And so here's a clip about what's coming about and what we need to know about this special election that could have major impact in the balance of powers moving forward.
Anticipated special election. Voters will decide whether to redraw congressional districts ahead of this year's midterms. And 7 News' Liana Golden is live in Fairfax County this morning. And Liana, early voting, it is officially over now.
Melody, it is. Your last day to cast that early ballot was on Saturday. If you didn't make it yet, time to head to the polls tomorrow on what will be a special election day here in Virginia. And the result could certainly have some big impact in Congress during President Trump's final 2 years in office.
This is one of the highest stakes special elections Virginia's seen in decades.
We spoke with the local political science professor over at George Mason about this vote that's part of a national Democratic response to GOP-led redistricting efforts elsewhere across the country ahead of the midterms. Now, usually redistricting is done after the census by a Virginia bipartisan commission. The redistricting ballot is designed to give Democrats a 10-to-1 advantage here. Currently, Democrats hold 6 seats to the Republicans' 5.
It's unilateral disarmament is one of the Democrats' arguments. They say, hey, if they're going to do that over there and we don't do it here, then we're going to be the good guys who lose.
Now, this redistricting amendment could change congressional district maps statewide federally through 2030. Now, polls will open tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. Of course, you can count on 7 News to keep you updated. Reporting live in Fairfax County, I'm Liana Golden, 7 News.
So what we're seeing there is the battle of the redistricting maps as Louisiana, Texas. I mean, there's a lot. If I remember, Missouri, I forget who else is doing it. There's a lot. Illinois is doing it. And so depending on the local representatives, the state representatives more so, who have the authority and are dealing with the redistricting and the redrawing of the maps, what Virginia's here is trying to do is flip it. And you heard there at the end of the video, this will affect things up until the 2030s. So this is a long-lasting effect. And you even have people such as former President Obama chiming in on this to say, hey, this is an important vote. You need to go out and deal with this. And then you also have your D.C. workers who live in Virginia who are affecting change in Virginia on a massive level. And what we've seen recently coming out of Virginia is these massive swings depending on who goes out and vote. So the report there is that early voting has ceased, and you have in-person voting tomorrow, literally, in Virginia. And so we want to pray for that, pray for the voters there on this issue to stand up. And there's also talks of being able to take away the process of the electoral vote and just go with the popular vote in the state. And this is a growing movement California is joining in on this and really leading the charge. This is very problematic. This is a federal issue. This will ultimately, if they do vote it, will get knocked down at the Supreme Court at the current layout of the
Let's
Supreme
explain
Court.
that, what that is about as well. Each in the Electoral College, each state gets X amount of electoral votes based on the population, which again goes back to the immigration issue, because many times the illegals are counted in the population of that state, which then changes the representatives they have, as well as their electoral votes that they have. So yeah, they may not actually pull a lever, but their presence in a state actually does help pull a lever. So this is why we've got to deal with this. The way I look at it is there needs to be an amendment. I mean, a piece of legislation passed that says even though you may live in that state, your presence there doesn't increase the representation of that state. That's my own personal opinion. But on this issue, especially on the redistricting, is huge. And then also on the Electoral College, because what they're saying, Virginia, I can't remember how many, there was 11 states, maybe a little more, Democrat states have all voted for this, that if the election comes that night and there's the majority wins, in other words, like let's say this last election, Trump won the Electoral College, but he didn't win the popular vote, which he did this time, but let's say he didn't. And let's say that Kamala won the popular vote. Well, the Virginia representatives at the Electoral College would get up and they'd say, how does Virginia vote? It's 20 electoral votes. They'll say Kamala Harris. And they will not give the votes to President Trump, even if he won Virginia.
Correct.
And that's the way it's going to work. And so you're going to subvert the Electoral College is what you're going to do with that. And this is a move. They tried, I think Colorado tried it in 2020, and or whenever Hillary had won the popular vote but lost Electoral College, they tried to cast a vote for her. It was thrown out. So we got to pray that the Supreme Court rule on this. That's what needs to happen. And rule that's unconstitutional is what needs to happen there. On the districting map and redistricting map, and for us in Louisiana, the Supreme Court refuses to rule. They're going to wait till June, which is after our primary, because we have an illegal district in our state already, and they gerrymandered, and we can't do anything about it because they're not going to rule till after our primary. But in Virginia, there's a potential that the Virginia state Supreme Court could rule against this election tomorrow. So we need to pray that happens. Number one, you guys in Virginia, I know quite a few people here on the pipeline watch us from Virginia. We're praying for your state, and we ask you to continue to contend for that. But if this happened, here's the point. This election in November, and we've said it multiple times here, is the most important election probably in American history. The Democrats recognize this, and so do the Republicans, except the Democrats are probably more on their game concerning the election, getting the vote out, making sure that they have done everything they can to manipulate it to get to where they can win. And I say that because I can prove to you many things that they're doing which are illegal, but they're doing them anyway. Ballot harvesting, which is legal, they have an A game. The Republicans have a F game. They're failing at that. They don't even consider it an important issue. And yet when Democrats do this, go door to door with ballots and say, have you voted? Let's fill out your ballot right here. Let me take it in for you. Knowing how that person voted, watching them fill out their ballot right in front of them. And if they didn't vote the right way, who knows what they do with that ballot. And if they didn't fill it out, they'll fill it out for them, et cetera. Those are the type of things that are going on. We've heard that from Republican constituents. Democratic constituents that are doing that. So on this one, the redistricting is a big issue because they know if it's a one person, one vote, which is America and the way it should be, and it is in most countries, France and Germany and other places, they do it that way. If it was that way, the Republicans we'd have a red wave. We would sweep this nation, and the Democrats know that. They know this is their moment in time in history, that if they're going to have a chance to bring all their ideologies back into play, they're going to have to win this midterm and basically neuter President Trump for his last 2 years. And that is where we have to fight like we've never fought before. These primaries, tomorrow's huge in Virginia. Then the following month, Louisiana has its primary. Cassidy, he's jumped back up in the polls, unfortunately, and he may make the runoff, but we're in a real battle here for that. So we have two big ones coming up. I think our early voting starts on the 2nd, where we'll start voting for our Senate race here in Louisiana. So we have these big issues. Let's keep pressing in. Pipeline, we're going to keep informing you, tell you which states to pray for each week so that we can make sure that we are on the wall fighting. And all we're asking for is justice. If the people want it and they vote for it, fine. But we don't want the system manipulated. We don't want them using the system to bring ideology without it being the will of the people. That'd be like the Holy Spirit forcing us to do something against our free will. And that's not what our call is. Our call is let the free will of the people decide that. So that's my opinion. And I'm asking you to pray with us on that.
Yeah, and to go back to the Electoral College issue, even in Colorado, the reason it failed is because as an electorate, when you go to cast your vote for the Electoral College, you're signing documents that say, I will vote the will of the people. So what these states are trying to do is they're trying to reverse federal law and reverse things to basically take control and circumvent. This more than likely, when it goes to the Supreme Court, if these bills are passed, will fail at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is going to say, this is not constitutional. It's very unconstitutional. The ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom, very well understands this and more than likely will take this up if these bills pass in places like Virginia. And I know our friends in Virginia are very concerned about this, as you're having, just like in California, you're having people who are being representative without representation. You have officials who will more than likely not come and survey them, not come talk to them. They're just going to stick to, especially in Virginia, the major areas where their popularist people are, where the massive amounts of people. And so the rural areas are going to get denied a lot of funding and a lot of things for there. And it's very sad to see these things play out. So with that, we want to continue staying on the wall. I know, Miss Danielle, you're right. Illinois was last year, but I know throughout now there's a lot of states. That was kind of my whole point. But thank you for bringing that up, about how there are many states trying to redistrict, trying to change things in favor, because Republicans are doing it and so Democrats are doing it as well. And this happens every cycle. So this is one thing to be very well aware of, and it's unfortunate that the Supreme Court won't rule. So with that, we want to close out. But then also remember, for those of you who have been longtime followers here on the Pipeline Report, we stuck with this because this verse, when the news gets hot and heavy, it can make you very frustrated. It can make you very cynical. It can get you all up in your feels and all up in your emotions. But in Ephesians 4:26, it says, be angry, yet do not sin. Obviously, King James Version there. I grew up around a bunch of Baptists, so that's why I quote King James there. But the reality is this, look, you can be angry, but don't let your anger cause you to sin. So when we're hearing stories about this, or when we're hearing things on the news, Fox News, CNN, whatever you listen to, YouTubers, podcasters, whatever the case may be, hear the Lord in the situation. How do we handle this, Lord? And let it be a conversation starter. Okay, Lord, when I hear this, it causes me to do this, rather than to kind of bury our head in the sand and say, I can't listen to the news. I just can't do it. We have to be more mature than that as believers and as prayer warriors, as intercessors, and watchmen on the wall. If you were a watchman and you were in the army and you were on a tower and you're saying, hey, I don't want to do this. This is my job. I want to bury my head in the sand. But then the people who are behind you are counting on you to stand up and sound the alarm if there were to be an attack, if there were an enemy coming out in the plains, you would need to warn them. And you can't just bury our head in the sands. So we have a call, we have a duty, in a sense, to really heed these warnings here. And that's what we're trying to do the best as we possibly can. We're not saying we have to have things go one way. It's, Lord, we want, your justice. We want what the people want, and really to see where the hearts of the people are. And in this instance, in several of these instances, is, look, the heart of the people, the cry of the people going back for years. Taking one example of the issue of life has been, hey, most people more than likely want life. They don't want death. And I think that's very simple. And for the longest time, their voice has been suppressed up until the Supreme Court came out and said, okay, no, this is wrong. Let's overturn it. And the voice of the people, the cries, the prayers, the bloodshed has been able to be overturned. And so the reality is look, there are many, many issues involved, and we just went over a few today. But the heart is, and the understanding is for us, is to see where the hearts and the minds of people are on these issues and pray. And in the areas you guys are at, and in the parts of the country that you are, we have Wyoming, Virginia, Illinois, Oregon, Arizona, many people who are joining in and anywhere and in between. These are examples of things that we can follow through on and praying through our local leaders, for the people in those areas, and like the event that just happened here this weekend with a major loss of life, is now it's an opportunity for us to engage this community at a more significant level and help support those who are blocks away, as we have done and will continue to do. But as we see this effort and need for support and a gathering, and all our leaders from what I listened to were talking about, hey, let's come together. Let's help in this situation. Let's do this. And this is all we're praying for and hoping for. And through this, we pray that God can come through and heal those families and protect those families of those who are affected by this, and then also even on a national level. So blessings to each and every one of you. We'll be back next week to continue to stay up to date on the hottest news topics and how we need to navigate that as intercessors, and then also staying engaged with the primaries as President Trump is on the campaign trail helping campaign for certain politicians. Doesn't mean he necessarily makes the right choice, but we do want to be aware of the primaries, as this is a major year, as Pastor Tim talked about, the most significant election we've had in our lifetime. And just so you know, the next election is always the most significant and important. So put that into context, if you will, but let's not make that bury our head in the sand. So blessings to each and every one of you for following along. We'll be back next week, and then we'll have noon prayer tomorrow again as well. So blessings, and we'll see you guys later. Have a good one.